Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. It felt like masochism, but I couldn't help myself. 30 minutes on the rowing machine, followed by 30 minutes on the damn treadmill. Every single day for the past 9 months. The only thing that changed was the music. I didn't have a smartphone, but I did have an old MP3 player, and I loaded it with anything I could find to drown out the anger. I suppose I should say it was to drown out the pain, but the anger seemed to grow with each passing day, pushing the pain into the background. Revenge scenarios played out in my mind as heavy metal blurred the reality around me. Both exercises were done on autopilot, without much thought or focus on what I was doing. For an hour each day, I entered a self-induced trance, consumed by the rage sparked by my wife's infidelity. After a quick shower at the gym, I walked to work. It would have been more practical to drive the 5 kilometers, but I found that the time spent walking helped calm me down. It usually took 58 minutes. In bad weather, a little longer. Not a fast pace, but good enough to slow my heartbeat. After work, I walked 3 kilometers back home at a more leisurely pace. The weekends disrupted the routine a bit, but I managed to fill that time by working around the house more than usual. I spent extra time mowing, trimming, and edging. Small details that I normally overlooked started catching my attention. Painting and patching became important because they filled the time. My MP3 player became my best friend. I earned a decent living working as a mechanic for Volvo. I specialized in commercial diesel fuel, and my certifications were always up to date. The income was enough to pay for my 2 daughters' college tuition, though we took out a second mortgage to cover some of the costs instead of burdening the girls with student loans. I suppose you could say that my family problems started with music. My wife, Robin, prefers classical music, which I can't stand. For her sake, I tried for several years to get into it, but it just wasn't meant to be. So, we had different tastes in music. That, in itself, wasn't enough to ruin a marriage, but she decided to take things further. She met other people who shared her musical tastes, which led to her joining local music producer and enthusiast associations and getting involved in them. The group had plans for concert trips, and she started signing up for everyone she could. Of course, she didn't even consider asking me to accompany her. When the trip started including overnight stays, I felt the need to do a little investigating. Serge Gorski was a pianist. He taught at the local college and played with several classical orchestral groups in the area. He regularly traveled to New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore for performances. My wife was enamored with him. Although she had kept quiet for a long time, it wasn't difficult for me to figure out that she had indeed become his personal lover during their trips. After gathering all the facts, I waited for the right moment and laid everything out for her. "Honey, we need to talk." Of course, things didn't go the way I expected. She didn't deny anything. She admitted to everything and in essence said, "So what?" I'm not a particularly smart man. I didn't know how to react to her response. I expected remorse. Instead, I got indifference and defiance. That moment changed our lives. At first, I was overwhelmed with grief and sadness. The pain was unbearable, but I kept myself together. I didn't say anything to our daughters or anyone else. Robin carried on as if nothing had happened. She cooked, cleaned, and kept the house in order, just like always. The only major change was that I now slept in the guest room. Robin had never worked, so she spent all her free time with her friends. Although we still lived in the same house, we were more like brother and sister than husband and wife. Her trips and outings became bolder. Photos of Serge and Robin started appearing in newspapers and local magazines, portraying them as a couple. There was no mention of me or the fact that she was married. Over time, my pain slowly turned into anger, and that anger grew to the point where it became hard to control. I didn't turn to alcohol. I went to the gym. I lost 20 kilograms. I was in the best shape of my life. I stopped taking medication for blood pressure and cholesterol. At home, I only ate dinner, and I quickly got used to whatever Robin cooked. For every kilogram of weight I lost, I gained 10 kilograms of bitterness. I became a bitter, hateful man. Even my friends and coworkers began to avoid me. And then I met Seymour. Seymour had been going to the gym for about 2 months before I spoke to him. During my workouts, I tended to keep to myself and rarely interacted with others. Some of us would casually nod or occasionally exchange quick handshakes. Seymour didn't socialize with anyone. Sometimes, I noticed him talking to himself. When you have headphones on, you don't always realize you're humming along or talking out loud. One day, he caught me smiling while he was deep in thought, and from then on, we developed a light, casual relationship. We started working out on the treadmill together, and then I slowly introduced him to the rowing machine. He was as focused on his exercises as I was. I quickly realized that we shared the same motivation. We began having coffee after workouts, and that led to the occasional lunch together. Having Seymour as a friend made things a lot easier. Finally, I had someone to confide in. I could pour my heart out. But instead of easing my frustration, it only made me angrier. Seymour didn't like running on the treadmill. In fact, he didn't like running at all. Physically, he could run, but mentally, he preferred not to. His wife, Trisha, was a fitness enthusiast. About 5 years ago, she became obsessed with fitness, and that's where it all started. She spent as much time as she could cycling, swimming, and running. The worst part was that she wasn't doing it alone. Marathons and Ironman competitions were constantly being held, and she participated in every one she could. Naturally, Seymour wasn't invited. Jan Dickens, a world-class triathlete, was happy to offer Trisha his companionship. It wasn't hard for Seymour to figure out that they shared transportation, hotel rooms, meals, and even business meetings. He confronted his wife. She told him to deal with it. One evening, after work, Seymour and I were eating ribs when the situation came to a head. Robin was in Washington, D.C. with Serge, and Trisha was in Hawaii for the Ironman in Kona with Gene Dickens. The ribs would have tasted better with a few cold beers, but we settled for unsweetened tea. "You know, John, we're just a couple of pathetic fools," Seymour said, shaking his head with a slightly somber look. He wasn't laughing. "Come on, Seymour. I'm not a fool." "Oh, really? How would you describe two guys who know their wives are cheating on them and just go along with it?" I paused for a moment, considering his words, then casually waved over the waitress. "Could you bring us a couple of beers, please?" "Seymour, I'm not a fool. I refuse to be." "Prove it." "John, we're both miserable men, hiding our grief by working out until we can't anymore. Do your daughters know what's going on? When was the last time you talked to them? Does your wife talk to your daughters? Thank God I don't have kids to worry about." I picked up a cold rib. "What do you suggest?" Seymour just shrugged and grabbed another rib. I started the weekend as usual, working in the yard. I had no idea when Robin would be back, and I didn't care. I assumed she'd stay for the weekend. After a light lunch, I met Seymour at the gym. Trisha wouldn't be back for another 5 days. She told Seymour that triathletes needed to decompress, or something like that, before airlines would allow them to fly. He knew it was mostly nonsense, but he wasn't about to call her out on it. We never finished the workout. "I've had enough. Damn it, I just can't do this anymore," Seymour said, grabbing his towel and heading for the shower. By the time I finished on the rowing machine, he was already dressed and out the door. He was right. I knew we had to do something. I spent the entire Sunday planning. Ideas came to me, and I immediately found reasons to dismiss them. The best idea seemed to be just leaving everything behind and disappearing, but I felt that would leave a bigger void inside me. I needed to get some kind of payback, but who should it be directed at? It had to be all of them. I needed to deal with 4 different people. I could never hurt Robin physically. It just wasn't in my nature. I was sure Seymour felt the same way about Trisha, but those 2 guys, well, that was a different story. Murder wasn't an option, but how could I make them feel the kind of pain that would matter? Suddenly, it all became clear. I quickly went to the garage and found exactly what I needed: a wooden mallet. Robin came home Sunday evening, glowing with happiness. She unpacked her things, took a shower, and went about her usual routine, but she didn't share any details about her weekend. I didn't bring it up. After she went to bed, I stayed up watching TV. "John, I'm not doing this. You're crazy. I don't care how bad things are. I'm not going to kill anyone." No, Seymour. You're not listening. We're not killing anyone. We're just going to teach them a little lesson. This isn't what it sounds like. I've seen that movie Strangers on a Train. William Bendix and that guy turned out to be murderers. You're suggesting the same thing. I'm not doing it, John. It was Farley Granger, not William Bendix, and we're not killing anyone. Why are we even doing this? What do you think we'll accomplish? All right. Seymour, why is your wife so drawn to this guy? What does he have that you don't, that makes her want him? You know what it is. He's a world-class athlete. I can't compete with that. I'm just a forklift driver, and I'm overweight on top of that. So, he's using his world-class athlete status to seduce your wife and take her away from you. Do you think that's fair? No. Seymour, this guy thinks he's so much better than everyone else that he can just take any woman he wants. It's the ultimate disrespect, and you don't want to make him pay for that? He's driven you to the brink, and you're just going to let him get away with it? John, I can't possibly stand up to him. That's the point. You don't have to. I'll handle it. And what's the compromise? Well, there's a world-famous piano virtuoso who might need some professional manual adjustments to his fingers. Think you can handle that? That depends on the circumstances. Do I need to use a wooden mallet? Seymour, use whatever damn tool you want. And so, we reached an agreement. Seymour was still a bit hesitant, so I told him I'd take care of Jean first, and then it would be easier for him to deal with Serge. We spent another 2 hours eating ribs, exchanging every piece of personal information we had. Our plan had a lot of gaps. The problem was, neither of us had the slightest idea what we were doing or how to do it. Jean was the biggest issue because of his physical condition. I figured I needed some sort of balancing factor. With this new special project in my life, I completely forgot about my wife and her lover. I took a 10-day leave of absence, as allowed by law. I focused on Gene Dickens. It turned out to be much more complicated than I had imagined. He worked as an insurance agent from 9 to 5, but the rest of his life was much more complex. Sometimes he would spend hours cycling whenever he could find the time. Almost every morning he went for a run, and 3 evenings a week he swam laps at the local youth club until the pool closed. On rainy days, he trained at the local gym. And of course, 2 or 3 times a week, he met with Trisha at his place. While I was busy tracking Jean, Seymour was keeping an eye on Serge. We met regularly at the gym and worked out, but we didn't discuss how things were going. We didn't even have each other's phone numbers. That was part of the plan. The only thing connecting us was that we both went to the same gym. Time passed, and I needed a new approach. Jean cycled on different routes and never jogged the same path. The best idea I could come up with was to catch him after his swimming practice. He parked his car behind the building. I spent a lot of time scouting for security cameras. I found a few in the front and on the sides of the building, but none in the back. I chose a stun gun, but I wasn't sure if it worked or how to test it. I had to take the risk. At least it came with instructions. Feeling a bit uneasy, I bought a $10 balaclava. We spent about 30 minutes on the treadmill, making small talk, when I felt it was time to get serious. Seymour, I think you need to take a 10-day leave as soon as possible. I don't want to know where you're going, but you need to give me the dates. Wherever you go, use your credit cards as much as possible. By the time we spent another 30 minutes on the machines, Seymour was practically glowing with satisfaction. Now, I had to figure out where I would go. It was raining, not too heavy, but enough to soak everything through. It was around 10 in the evening, and Gene Dickens was due to come out of the back door of the pool any minute. Gene's Outback was the only car left in the rear parking lot. I double-checked and still couldn't find any security cameras. Just to be safe, I put on the balaclava. He was annoyed when he saw the flat tire. The stun gun worked exactly as advertised, and within 5 minutes, I was on my way home. It wasn't in the morning papers, but the evening news carried a brief report about a local man who had been attacked and injured behind the pool building the previous night. To prevent further incidents, security cameras had been installed in the area. There was no mention of the type of injuries he sustained. They had no suspects or motive. I had no idea where Seymour was or when he planned to return. The wooden mallet, stun gun, and balaclava had been disposed of in 3 different dumpsters downtown. My boss wasn't thrilled when I told him I would be attending Volvo Penta training courses in Orlando for 3 weeks. He couldn't see how a course on marine engines would benefit him. I told him I'd pay for the course myself and use my vacation days. He was still unhappy. I left a note in Seymour's locker at the gym, explaining that I'd be out of town until the end of June. "Robin, I have to go to Orlando for 3 weeks of training. Do you want to come with me, or would you rather stay home and relax?" "John, the summer concert season is in full swing. You know how much I enjoy the events in the park. I'd prefer to stay here. Besides, you'll be busy with classes most of the time, right?" "Yes, and it can get pretty stuffy down there in the summer. I understand why you wouldn't want to go, but I felt I should ask." "Thank you, dear. I appreciate the offer, but I'll probably be more comfortable here. Maybe we can think about a short trip later in the summer. Perhaps a weekend in New England or something like that." Of course, this conversation went exactly as I expected. Now, on to the next phase of the plan. There were no further updates about Gene Dickens. I left at dawn on Saturday, planning to reach Orlando in 2 days, with a stop at the Tennessee Aquarium in Chattanooga. Priorities must be set, after all. Fortunately, the school had arranged a long-term rental that included a small kitchenette. I didn't want to eat out every day. I made sure to call Robin and let her know I arrived safely. The local newspaper charged $1 a month if you wanted to read it online. I took care of that as soon as I got settled into the course. Starting tomorrow, I would carefully check the news from back home, paying special attention to police reports. I was eager to see if Seymour would follow through on his part of the agreement. I also wanted to know if the police had any leads regarding the Dickens incident. Within a kilometer, there was a Planet Fitness gym, and I took advantage of my guest privileges there. The first week of my time off was boring. The second week was interesting, and the third week was simply fantastic. Of course, I'm not referring to the school training. That was top-notch the entire time. Every day, I scanned the newspapers for something interesting. There was a concert held in the park, organized by my wife's lover. I'm sure she enjoyed that little outing. At the end of the next week, an article appeared on the front page about a horrifying attack on Serge Gorski, a professor at the local university and conductor of the symphony orchestra. The police seemed to think it was some sort of professional vendetta since the only injuries he sustained were to both of his hands. There was also a comparison made to the recent attack on Gene Dickens, but they couldn't link the two incidents. At that point, there were no suspects. I spent the rest of the evening with 6 bottles of beer, trying to figure out when, where, and how Seymour pulled it off. I didn't really want to know, but it was amusing to think about. The next morning, one of the Volvo Penta school administrators informed me that a police officer from Pennsylvania had called and confirmed that I was indeed attending the school and hadn't missed a single class. I expected nothing less. I was curious when my wife would bring this up. I hadn't heard from her in a few days. Preparing for her call, I went out and bought another pack of beer. The call never came. The final week of training turned out to be the most successful. We had half a day for interviews with potential employers, which I hadn't expected. In my opinion, any offer would have been good. My age, experience, and willingness to relocate gave me a bit of an edge over most of the other students. I got the offer I wanted, and the choice was easy. I decided to make a quick stop on my way home to check everything out. There were no follow-up articles in the papers about either of the mysterious attacks. Robin still hadn't called. The marina at Perdido Bay was technically in Alabama, though you could see Florida from across the water. Bill Morgan was eager to show me his pride and joy. Besides major repairs, they also had a large, multi-level storage facility. Half a dozen board games were stacked by the docks. The main highlight was a small mobile home at the far end of the lot, which he said I could use for free. I asked him to tell me more about the warehouse, which he said would be my future workplace. After explaining how things worked, he jokingly asked if I had any experience with forklifts. I immediately thought of Seymour. Returning home felt a bit less warm than I'd hoped. My loving wife gave me a quick hug and kissed me on the cheek. I tried to start some casual conversation a few times, but Robin responded with nothing more than light small talk. She didn't mention Serge at all. I didn't push the subject, but I smiled to myself. I took a shower, changed, and we enjoyed a light meal together. I had been gone for 25 days, but it felt like I had never left. I was looking forward to a good morning workout at the gym. He was there when I arrived. "Good morning, Seymour." "Good morning, John." We kept working out for about 20 minutes without saying a word. It felt a bit strange. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Coffee, Seymour?" "Man, I thought you'd never ask." We didn't even bother to shower or change. We just grabbed our things and headed across the street to Mickey D's. "How's everything with you, John?" "Quiet. Feels like I never left. If I hadn't read about what happened in the paper, I'd never have known. How about you?" "The complete opposite. Trish is furious and taking it out on me. The police cleared me completely, but she's convinced I had something to do with the attack. She's spending more time with him, playing nurse, than she is at home. She even stayed over at his place a couple of nights. In a way, it's kind of a relief. I enjoy being away from her more than being with her. You did a pretty good job on him. His triathlon days are over." I wasn't sure. I never read about the exact injuries he had. "Did you have a tough time with the police?" "They were ridiculously thorough. They checked my phone records and bank accounts, trying to tie me to the attack. After about a week, they finally gave up. Trisha was the one pushing the hardest to get me in trouble." "Just curious, but where did you go?" "I was on a windjammer cruise out of Rockland, Maine. I loved it." "Good for you." "I had to sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day for 3 weeks." "So, what now, John?" "Well, I don't know about you, but I'm getting out of here. I've got a job near Pensacola, and I'm leaving at the end of the week." "Are you going to divorce her?" "No, I'm just taking everything and walking away. If she wants a divorce, she can file for it. I'm curious to see if old Serge will step up and take her in or leave her hanging." "What about your house and everything else?" "I'm leaving her everything, except the money in the bank. She gets the mortgage, the car payments, the utility bills, and her credit card." "That gives me something to think about. You'll let me know where you end up, right?" "Of course. By the way, did you have any trouble with Serge?" "Not really. The day before, I sprayed the garage security cameras with wasp spray and grabbed a meat tenderizer from the kitchen to finish the job. One quick hit to the head, then about half a dozen blows to each hand. I even made sure to break both of his thumbs. He never saw me. When I left, he was still unconscious." When I got back from the gym, Robin wasn't home. I quickly showered and headed to work. My boss wasn't happy when I quit. I closed all our bank accounts, leaving only a few $100s. I also canceled all the credit cards. We usually kept them at a zero balance anyway. After another quiet dinner with my wife, I grabbed a beer and went to the study. I took out my passport, birth certificate, and military registration card. I didn't plan on taking much else with me. My work tools were already on the back seat of the Subaru. The only things left to pack were some clothes and my laptop. Robin was talkative, but still very reserved. The next morning, she left early. Over a year ago, she had stopped telling me where she was going whenever she left the house. I guess she felt I didn't need to know. It took me less than 30 minutes to load the car. At the last minute, I decided to take the George Foreman grill. It seemed like a good idea. I was on the highway near Luray when I decided to let Seymour know I was leaving. It was a short text message, Perdido Bay Marina. Whatever he decided to do was fine with me. It only took me a few weeks to settle in. During that time, my phone remained off. The work was different, but still the same, if that makes sense. I spent most of my free time fixing up the trailer. Everything worked fine, but it needed a little love and care. The second bedroom became a storage space. About half a kilometer down the road from the marina, there was a small diner that was open 24/7. I found myself eating there most of the time. Unfortunately, the nearest gym was 10 kilometers away, so I took up jogging. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it anyway. At least there were no hills. Then my first guest showed up. "Seymour, you found me." "Not that hard, John. GPS led me straight here. Bob's your uncle." "Who the hell is Bob?" I thought. "Are you just passing through or staying?" "Staying, if you've got room. I've got nowhere else to go." We spent about an hour getting Seymour settled in the second bedroom, then grabbed a bite at the diner. Seymour had driven nonstop for 16 hours and was exhausted. The next morning, I let him sleep in. Bill Morgan hired Seymour right away. He hated working with forklifts and was more than happy to switch jobs. The pay was lousy, but Seymour didn't seem to mind. He just wanted enough to get by. He had a stash of cash he brought with him. Later, I took him to Foley's so he could rent a safe deposit box at the same bank I used. It wasn't very secure to keep it in the trailer. Tricia kept insisting to the police that Seymour was responsible for the attack on Gene Dickens. They couldn't prove anything. His alibi in Maine was rock solid, and they couldn't find any accomplices. Naturally, their relationship deteriorated quickly. Tricia demanded that Seymour leave the house, to which he refused. In the end, she moved in with Dickens, and 2 days later, Seymour got exactly what he wanted. I decided it was time to reach out to my daughters. First, I called my eldest, Clara. As soon as I said, "Hello," she hung up. Cora, my younger daughter, was a bit more open. Before hanging up, she called me an inconsiderate jerk. I tried again and failed miserably. Well, at least I wouldn't have to pay for 2 expensive weddings in the future. I turned off my phone again. Seymour and I settled in fairly quickly. Every morning, I jogged about 10 kilometers, and then we'd meet at the diner for breakfast. They made a delicious low-carb meal just for me. We ate lunch whenever it was convenient. A couple of weeks went by, and things changed. For the past 6 months, R.G. Martin had been living on a Nordic tug in Slip 16. She didn't have any land transportation, so Seymour was more than happy to drive her wherever she needed to go. Soon, I lost my dinner companion, and shortly after that, my breakfast buddy too. Before long, the second bedroom in the trailer became a storage room again. Seymour was happy, and I was glad for him. Whenever I tried to talk to him about her, he'd change the subject. Bill Morgan wasn't much help either. He was just happy that RG paid her slip fees and utilities on time. She never asked for any special treatment. Something was going on, but as long as Seymour was happy, I didn't pry. It felt like I had lost track of time. Nearly a year had passed since I left. I hadn't spoken to my wife, my daughters, or anyone else back home. Sometimes, Seymour, RG, and I would go out for dinner, and we always had a good time. I managed to learn that RG was originally from Ohio, had been a military wife, and had no children. She never mentioned her husband, and I wasn't going to ask. RG always preferred to dine in Foley or Gulf Shores, but refused to go to Pensacola. It was an odd quirk, but I learned to live with it. On Monday morning, everything came together. It had rained all night and didn't seem like it was going to stop. Instead of my usual run, I put on my old army poncho and trudged to the diner. I was finishing my second cup of coffee when I saw a familiar car pull up to the marina. It was a green Subaru, owned by Gene Dickens. A woman, presumably Tricia, got out, opened an umbrella, and hurried to the marina office. A minute later, she waved to the driver. Gene stepped out of the car, limping slightly, and made his way to the office, trying in vain to dodge the raindrops. "Damn it, Seymour. Pick up." Finally, he answered. "Seymour, you've got a problem. How quickly can you drop everything and get the hell out of here?" "What the hell are you talking about?" "Slow down. Your wife's here, and she's with Gene Dickens. They're in the office talking to Bill right now. It's your call. You can either talk to her or quietly slip away. I think the rain will give you good cover." "John, it'll take me at least 15 to 20 minutes. Can you stall them?" "I'll try. Hurry up." My next call was to Bill. He chuckled slightly as he agreed to send the guest to my trailer instead of RG's. I got back to the trailer just as they were leaving the office. Naturally, I invited them in and did my best to kill as much time as possible. I made casual conversation with the man I had attacked less than a year ago, the one-eyed crippled, hoping my newly grown facial hair would help me go unnoticed. They never explained why they were there or why they were looking for Seymour. I didn't ask. As we walked to the docks, the rain turned into a gray mist. The tugboat was barely visible on the far side of the bay because of the fog, but I was the only one paying attention to it. They were just staring at the empty slip. Within 5 minutes, the boat was completely gone. I never introduced myself, nor did I tell them how I knew Seymour. They didn't ask. I excused myself and went back to work. Shortly after, they left. I never saw Seymour again. A few months later, we had a visit from Phil Martin, Argie's brother-in-law. He was looking for Warren, Argie's husband. The last time Phil had spoken to his brother was over a year ago. Warren and Argie had been docked at Blackwater Bay in Pensacola. The Escambia County Sheriff's Department had received several reports of domestic disturbances involving the couple, and then the complaints suddenly stopped. Warren Martin had retired from the U.S. Air Force, and his pension checks were still being cashed, even though no one had seen him or his wife in over a year. I had no idea how Phil tracked Argie to this place. Maybe it was just a lucky guess. Another 6 months passed. I missed Seymour. The work was steady, but I was getting bored. I spent my evenings wondering if I should look for a companion or maybe search for a new place to live. I avoided bars and never went to church. The gym was a bit awkward, and none of the waitresses at the diner seemed interesting enough to date. Eventually, I became interested enough to reach out to Volvo Pinta again. They had 2 good openings, one in Biloxi, the other in Galveston. I couldn't decide. I was having lunch, trying to choose between the 2 options, when I was rudely interrupted. "Hello, John. You're not easy to find." Robin looked older and tired. The last 2 years hadn't been kind to her. "Sorry, I wasn't hiding. What brings you here so unexpectedly?" She slid an envelope across the table to me. "Your final divorce papers. I thought you might need them. I filed for divorce a year after you left. If you knew where I was, why did you come all the way here? You could have just mailed them." "I don't know. I guess it's the end. You really left me in a tough spot, but I suppose I deserved it. That wasn't my intention. I just wanted to leave so you could be with Serge. I felt like I was holding you back." "Well, you didn't leave me much. No money in a house that was mortgaged, which the bank eventually took. What really upset me was that you took the George Foreman grill. I figured your lover could replace me. By the way, where is he?" After Serge's accident, things didn't go as planned. About 6 months ago, he went back to Estonia. "You didn't go with him?" "I wasn't invited." I didn't comment. Serge was a little annoyed. He thought you had something to do with his attack. After that, things between us seemed to fizzle out. And now what? Clara got married last June, and they moved to Ocala. I'm planning to move in with them and be a grandmother. I decided to take a detour on my way to deliver your papers. Foolish me. I sat there like an idiot, waiting for some kind of apology, but it never came. In the end, it felt like she was still rubbing it in my face. There was no remorse, no regret on her part. "Well, Robin, I'm glad you stopped by. I'm sorry I missed Clara's wedding, but it seems like she didn't want me there anyway. I'm also sorry things didn't work out with Serge. I know how much that meant to you. Is there anything else before you go?" "Yes. I want the George Foreman grill." I settled on Biloxi. It was only a 2-hour drive away. The casinos seemed interesting enough. I gave her that damn George Foreman grill. Thank you for listening until the end.